Irina hadn't changed the living room curtains in 3 years. They hung the same way they did the week before the accident. Dustier now, worn at the edges, their once vibrant blue faded into a tired gray. She didn't see the point in changing anything. Not since that day. The day everything inside her went quiet. 3 years ago, her son, Leonid, left for school with his usual wide smile. He turned back at the doorway, just like always, threw up a peace sign, and shouted, "Love you, Mama." It was their morning ritual. She would reply, "Come home safe, my sunshine," and he'd pretend to blow her a kiss before disappearing down the steps. Only that time, he never came back. A driver on his phone, in a rush to catch a meeting, had blown through a red light and struck Leonid while he crossed at the school zone. It was instant. They told her that like it was some kind of mercy. He didn't feel a thing. It was fast. You should be thankful he didn't suffer. But they didn't understand. When your child dies, the pain doesn't leave room for gratitude. It makes no difference how quick it was. The world had torn her heart out and expected her to keep breathing. The months that followed were a blur. She barely remembered the funeral. People brought flowers, food, hollow words, and then quietly vanished from her life, one by one. Grief made others uncomfortable. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid small talk. Even her sister visited less and less, bringing excuses like just giving you space or "I didn't want to bother you." Irina didn't need space. She needed her son. She stopped working, stopped cooking proper meals. She forgot how to laugh. The once warm home now echoed with silence. Her walls, filled with framed photos of Leonid, grinning in his soccer uniform, covered in cake on his 6th birthday, holding up a wobbly cardboard sign that read "Best Son Ever," where the only evidence that happiness had ever lived there. And so, for 3 years, Irina's world shrank to a pattern of stillness. She would wake before dawn, make black tea that went cold on the counter, sit by the window, and stare out at the world that continued turning without her. She watched the seasons change. Children grew taller. New families moved in. Life went on, but not for her. Some evenings, she would hear the sound of soccer balls bouncing in the distance or a boy's laughter drifting in from the courtyard. And she would close her eyes and pretend it was Leonid. Sometimes she would whisper, "I miss you, my sunshine," into the darkness, as if her words might reach him, wherever he was. That particular night, the sky outside had sunk into a dense navy blue, clouds blanketing the stars. Rain tapped softly against the glass, and Irina sat in her worn chair with a faded photo album resting on her lap. She traced Leonid's face with her fingertip, lingering on his bright eyes. Then the knock came. It wasn't timid. It was sharp, clear, 3 deliberate strikes. Irina froze. At first, she thought she imagined it. No one visited her, especially not this late. She waited, heart pounding quietly in her chest, but the knock came again, this time more urgent. 4 times. Then silence. She rose from her chair, every step toward the door slow, uncertain. A flicker of unease crept through her, but it was overpowered by something else. Curiosity. Or maybe instinct. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the lock. The hallway light flickered slightly above her. The world felt suddenly too quiet. She opened the door just a crack. The chain still latched. What she saw made her breath catch. Standing in the hallway was a boy, no older than 16. Soaking wet from the rain, a hoodie clinging to his frame. His head was bowed, his arms wrapped around himself as if trying to hold in warmth. But when he looked up, Irina's knees buckled slightly. Her hand went to her mouth. He had Leonid's eyes. Exactly. Not just similar, identical. That soft brown, the same flecks of gold near the iris, the same gentle tilt. She stared, unable to speak. And then the boy whispered the words that shattered the stillness of 3 years. "Mom." The word was barely audible, but it landed with the weight of thunder in her chest. Irina's hand trembled as she fumbled to unlatch the chain. Her mind raced. Was this some cruel prank? A hallucination? Had her grief finally broken her mind? The boy didn't move. She opened the door fully and stared at him, her voice cracking as she forced herself to speak. "What did you just say?" He stepped forward slowly, his expression a mix of confusion and fear, as if he wasn't sure he was welcome. I don't know what's happening," he said, his voice shaky. I remember your face. I saw it in my dreams. And then I woke up, and I had to come here." Irina was speechless. Her entire body shivered, though the hallway was warm. "Who are you?" she managed. "I don't know," he replied honestly, "but I think I belong here." And then something unimaginable happened. A faint melody drifted from the boy's lips. He began humming, barely audible, a lullaby. Irina's lullaby. The one she used to sing to Leonid every night before bed. No one else knew it. It wasn't a famous song. It was hers, just a little tune she made up when he was a baby. She hadn't sung it since he died. Tears filled her eyes. This was impossible. Yet, there he stood. The boy didn't try to explain further. He didn't seem to have answers. He only looked at her with quiet hope. Irina, still trembling, reached out and gently touched his cheek. He didn't pull away. She didn't understand. Logic screamed at her. This couldn't be. Her son had died. She buried him. She saw the body, signed the papers. But here, before her, stood someone who shared his soul. She whispered his name. "Leonid?" He didn't answer. But he didn't say no either. In that moment, Irina felt the smallest flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. And it terrified her. Irina couldn't breathe. The weight of the moment pressed down on her chest like a heavy stone, suffocating any coherent thought. She stepped back, feeling the coolness of the wall behind her, as if it might steady her. She had to be dreaming. This couldn't be real. Yet there he was, this boy who looked so much like Leonid, with those hauntingly familiar eyes. She took a shaky step toward him, her hand still trembling as she reached for his arm. Her touch was tentative, as if she was afraid he might vanish if she held on too tightly. The boy didn't flinch. Instead, he looked down at her hand, and then back at her face, his gaze soft, almost apologetic. "I know this must be overwhelming," he said in a voice that was so much like Leonid's, it sent a shiver through Irina's spine. "I don't know how to explain it. I had to come here. I've been looking for you." Irina's heart pounded so loudly in her ears, she wondered if he could hear it. Her legs felt weak beneath her, and she sank slowly onto the old wooden chair by the door. She couldn't tear her gaze away from him. "Why are you here?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Who are you? Why do you look like my son? My Leonid?" The boy hesitated, his eyes flickering with something close to pain. "I don't have the answers, but I think I was meant to find you." Irina stared at him, her mind spinning. The room seemed to close in around her. She gripped the arm of the chair, trying to steady herself, but it wasn't enough. The air was thick with confusion, a suffocating fog that made it difficult to think. I don't understand," she managed. "My son, Leonid, he's gone. I buried him. I saw him. I saw him. I saw his body." The words tumbled out in a rush, but even as she spoke them, she felt the ground beneath her shake. It felt like she was unraveling. How could she even begin to make sense of this? The boy looked at her, his eyes softening with something like sympathy, but there was no fear in his gaze. He stepped closer, and Irina flinched, not because she was afraid, but because she wasn't sure if she could handle the weight of this moment, the weight of the possibility that this was real. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Tell me the truth. If you're Leonid, if this is really him, tell me everything. How are you here? Why are you here?" The boy sat down across from her, not in a rush, but with a kind of hesitant deliberation. His fingers twisted nervously in his lap. "I don't know how to explain this," he said quietly, his voice carrying a thread of uncertainty. "I don't even know what happened. One minute I was in a place, and then I woke up, and everything was different. It's like I was lost, and now I'm here. In this world, in this body." Irina's breath caught in her throat. "In this body? What are you talking about?" Her pulse quickened. The pieces weren't fitting together. Nothing made sense. Was this some kind of sick joke? Was someone playing a cruel game with her? "I know this sounds impossible," the boy continued, his eyes never leaving her face, "but I'm not sure how else to explain it. When I woke up, I remembered you. I remembered the way you looked at me, the way you loved me. And then I saw you, just like I remembered. I knew I had to come find you." Irina's head spun, and her stomach churned with an aching emptiness that she had learned to live with. But now it felt different. There was a strange pull inside her, as if something deep within her soul was crying out. The way he spoke, the way he looked at her. He didn't know all the answers, but something inside her was screaming that he wasn't lying. "Not about this." She swallowed, trying to steady her breath. "So you're saying, you're my son, Leonid. But how? How can this be?" "I don't know," he admitted, his voice cracking. "I don't know how or why. But I think maybe this is some kind of second chance. Maybe I'm here because I was meant to be. Maybe this is why I found you, even though I don't understand it myself." Irina closed her eyes, her mind racing. Every cell in her body screamed that this was too much, that it was impossible. But another part of her, the part she had buried deep inside for so long, wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that her son, her precious boy, had somehow found his way back to her. "I don't understand," she whispered again, her voice shaky. "How is this possible?" "I wish I could tell you," he said softly, his hands clenched in his lap. "But I don't have the answers. All I know is that I remember everything. I remember us. I remember your love. And I remember how you cried when I left. I couldn't forget that. It's been with me all this time." Irina wiped the tears that were now streaming down her face. Her chest ached, and she felt like her heart was being torn in two. She wanted to be angry. She wanted to scream at him, demand that he tell her the truth, but she couldn't. Something in his eyes, in the rawness of his emotion, told her that he was telling the truth, that he was not some stranger. Slowly, carefully, Irina stood up. Her legs were still shaky, but she found the strength to approach him. She knelt down in front of him and gently cupped his face in her hands. His skin was warm, his eyes so familiar, and for the first time in years, she felt a flicker of something she thought she'd lost forever. "Hope. I don't know if I can believe this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But if this is really you, Leonid, if this is truly you, then I don't want to lose you again." He nodded, his eyes filling with tears. "I won't leave you again, Mom. I promise." Irina held him then, pulling him close. The warmth of his body, the beat of his heart against hers, was all she needed to feel like she was waking from a nightmare. For a moment, the world outside the door, with its gray skies and endless rain, disappeared. It was just the two of them, a mother and her son, reunited in the strangest of ways. But even as she held him close, she couldn't shake the feeling that this miracle that had brought him back to her, had a price, and the cost of this second chance was something she couldn't yet understand. But for now, she didn't care. For now, she would hold him. And for the first time in 3 long years, she would allow herself to believe. Irina sat there, her arms wrapped tightly around the boy. She now believed, against every rational thought in her mind, was her son. The tears that flowed freely down her cheeks felt like a release she didn't know she needed. For 3 long years, she had been suffocating in grief, a grief so deep it had left her hollow. But here, in this quiet moment, With his heartbeat thudding softly against her chest, she began to feel something she thought she'd never experience again: peace. But there was a strange, unsettling stillness in the air, like the calm before a storm. The boy, the young man, really, who looked so much like Leonid, was not the child she remembered. His eyes were older, and his mannerisms carried the weight of someone who had lived more than the years that should have been his. His hands were rougher, worn from some unknown struggle, and his voice, though undeniably hers, had a depth to it that was different from Leonid's carefree tone. "Mom," he whispered after a long silence, his voice breaking through the stillness. "I know you have questions, so many questions, and I'm sorry. I wish I could give you all the answers." Irina pulled back slightly, enough to look into his eyes, and nodded. She was still holding him tightly, as if afraid he might disappear if she let go, but her heart was a tornado of emotions. Fear, hope, desperation, wonder. "I don't even know where to begin," she said, her voice hoarse. "I don't understand any of this. You died, Leonid. I saw your body. I buried you. How is it possible that you're standing here?" The boy, no, her son, looked at her, his eyes filled with sorrow. I know how it must feel to you. I don't have the full answer. But I think I was given a second chance to be with you again. I don't know how or why, but I know that I remember everything, every moment we had together. The way you loved me, the way you held me when I was hurt, when I was scared. That love never left me." Irina's hands trembled as she wiped her tears away. The words were almost too much to bear. Her heart was still in pieces, scattered across the years she had spent mourning him. And yet, in his presence, there was a warmth, an undeniable familiarity, that soothed the jagged edges of her pain. "Are you real?" she asked quietly. "Is this really happening, or am I just losing my mind? Am I just imagining this?" He shook his head slowly. "I'm as real as you are. I don't know how this happened, but I know I'm here. I don't know what the universe, or whatever higher power there is trying to tell me. But I know I'm meant to be here with you. I've always been meant to be with you." Irina closed her eyes, trying to steady herself, but her emotions felt like they were crashing over her in waves. She had longed for this moment for so long, dreamt of it in the quiet hours of the night, when she couldn't sleep for the weight of grief that clung to her soul. But now, with him here, alive, breathing, and standing before her, she didn't know if she could handle the truth. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to believe this," she whispered, her voice cracking. "What if this is just a dream? What if I wake up tomorrow, and you're gone again?" The boy placed a gentle hand on her cheek, his touch so tender, so familiar, that it made her heart ache. "I'm not going anywhere, Mom. I swear. I don't know how, but I'm here for a reason. I'm here to make things right, to be with you, to heal the wounds I left behind." Irina leaned into his touch, closing her eyes, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to believe that this was real, to believe that somehow the impossible had happened, and her son, her beautiful, wonderful Leonid, had come back to her. But even as she allowed herself to feel that hope, doubts lingered at the edges of her mind. How could she just accept this? How could she trust that this was truly him? And yet she couldn't bring herself to push him away. She couldn't bear to do that. She stood up slowly, the boy following her movement with a watchful gaze, his eyes never leaving hers. She walked to the small bookshelf that stood against the wall, the one she had filled with books over the years. It was the same bookshelf that Leonid used to love to raid when he was younger, searching for a new adventure in the pages of a story. She ran her fingers along the worn spines of the books, each one a piece of the past, a piece of him. Irina stopped at a particular book, one she hadn't opened in years, the photo album Leonid had made for her on his 16th birthday. She pulled it out carefully, as though afraid it would crumble in her hands, and sat back down beside the boy. She opened the pages slowly, her eyes catching on the photographs. There he was, smiling, his eyes bright with mischief, his arms wrapped around her, their faces pressed together in a perfect moment of happiness. This was his last birthday, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It was only a few months before. Her voice faltered, but she pressed on, the pain of loss so raw in her chest. He was just a boy. He had so much life ahead of him. The boy looked at the photo, his eyes softening with a tenderness that made Irina's heart ache. I remember that day. I remember how you made my favorite cake, the one with too much icing. You sang to me, and I hated it, but I loved it at the same time. I remember the way your face lit up when I opened my gift. Irina blinked, taken aback. You remember that? He smiled, a small, sad smile, but there was something in his eyes, a glimmer of the boy she had raised, the boy who had filled her life with so much joy. I remember everything, he said quietly. The way you made me feel safe. The way you loved me, unconditionally. And I remember that day when I left, when I didn't come home. I know how much it broke you. I'm sorry. Irina could feel the ache in her chest growing, an overwhelming wave of sorrow that she didn't know how to navigate. I don't know if I can forgive myself for not being able to protect you, she whispered. I should have kept you safe. The boy took her hand gently, looking at her with an expression that was both comforting and wise beyond his years. It wasn't your fault, Mom. You couldn't have known. You loved me the best way you knew how. Irina closed the photo album and set it down beside her. She had so many more questions, too many to count. But right now, in this quiet moment, the only thing she could focus on was the fact that he was here. Her son was here. And no matter how strange, how impossible it seemed, she couldn't bring herself to turn him away. For the first time in 3 years, Irina allowed herself to hope. She didn't know what this was, what this second chance meant, but she was willing to find out. She squeezed his hand, a silent promise between them. I'm not letting you go again. And for the first time in so long, she didn't feel alone. Irina woke to the sound of soft footsteps echoing through the hallways of her apartment. For a moment, she thought she was still dreaming. The night had been long, filled with restless thoughts, and yet somehow, despite all the questions swirling in her mind, she had managed to fall into a light, fragile sleep. But now, the world felt different. It felt alive again. The boy, Leonid, or the boy who looked like him, was still there, sitting quietly by the window when she finally opened her eyes. His figure was bathed in the soft morning light, and he seemed to be staring out into the world, lost in thought. Irina's heart gave a small, quiet lurch. It was hard to fully grasp that he was here, that after everything, after all the pain and the years of mourning, her son had returned in some inexplicable way. Good morning, he said softly without turning around, as though he had sensed her waking before she did. His voice still carried the same warmth she remembered, though it had grown softer, more reflective. Irina sat up in bed slowly, stretching the remnants of sleep away. She felt a strange sense of calm in her chest, a calm she hadn't experienced in what felt like forever. It wasn't just the fact that he was here, or that the impossible had somehow become her reality. It was also the realization that, despite the answers still evading her, she was not alone anymore. She had spent so long drowning in the silent depths of grief, haunted by the memory of Leonid's absence, that to see him here now was like finding a missing piece of herself. She wondered if he felt the same. How could he not? He had been in the world beyond hers, whatever that meant, and now he was back, alive, but changed. Irina stood up and walked over to him. Her movements were slow, almost cautious, as if she were afraid this might be some fleeting moment. She sat next to him by the window, the cool air drifting through the curtains, carrying with it the faint scent of morning dew and rain. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, though. It was more like a shared understanding, an unspoken acknowledgement that there was still much to unravel. But for now, there was a sense of peace in just being there together. I never thought I'd see this day, Irina finally murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. She couldn't find the words to express the confusion, the wonder that she felt. After everything, I never thought I'd get you back. Leonid, her son, turned to face her then. His eyes, though older, still held that unmistakable spark that had always been his. He smiled, a sad, knowing smile, but there was tenderness in it. I never thought I'd get to come back either, he said. I didn't think I'd be able to fix things. But somehow, I'm here now. And I know this is my second chance. Irina's chest tightened. She had so many questions she didn't know where to begin. But what is this? How are you here? You died. I buried you. I know, he replied, his voice heavy with the weight of understanding. I don't have all the answers. I don't know how it happened, but I remember everything from before I. He paused, as though struggling with the right words. Before I left. And I remember what you went through, Mom. I remember how you never gave up on me, even after everything. She swallowed, feeling the lump in her throat grow. The loss of her son had shattered her, but she had continued to survive. Somehow. But how? How had she made it through those years without him? Every day felt like walking through a fog, her steps heavy, the pain so deep she couldn't breathe properly. And I'm sorry, he added softly, his gaze lowering as though ashamed. Sorry for the pain I caused. Sorry for leaving without warning, without saying goodbye. Irina reached out and touched his hand, her fingers tracing the familiar warmth of his skin. There were still so many things she didn't understand, so many things that didn't make sense. But sitting here now, with him beside her, she realized that the weight of those questions didn't matter as much as the simple truth. He was back. For whatever reason, against all odds, he was back. You don't need to apologize, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. You were just a child. I couldn't protect you. But it wasn't your fault. You didn't choose any of this. He nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. There was something raw, something tender about the way he looked at her. She could see the guilt, the sorrow, in his expression. The boy she had raised had always been kind, always thoughtful, and though he had been taken from her far too soon, she knew that part of him still existed, even in this strange new version of him. They sat together like that for a long while, watching the sun rise higher into the sky, painting the world outside in soft hues of pink and gold. Irina could feel the weight of the past 3 years pressing down on her chest, but for the first time in ages, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could breathe again. She had her son back. And in that small, tender moment, that was enough. Eventually, Leonid stood up and walked to the kitchen, his steps light, almost casual, though there was something more deliberate in his movements now. Irina watched him, trying to reconcile the boy who had left with the young man standing in front of her. He was still the same in so many ways, but there was something undeniably different about him, something that was both familiar and foreign at the same time. He returned with a cup of tea, handing it to her with a small, knowing smile. I made it just the way you like it, with honey, just a little. Irina took the cup from him, feeling the warmth radiate through her fingers. The simple act of him remembering, of him paying attention to the little things, made her heart swell with a tenderness she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. It was as though the boy who had left her was still inside of him, and now she had the chance to make new memories with him. Thank you, she said softly, taking a sip. The warmth of the tea filled her senses, grounding her, calming her. She watched him sit back down beside her, his hands clasped in his lap as he turned to face her. There was a quiet intensity in his gaze, a yearning for something more. I know this is a lot for you to take in, Mom, but I want to make it right. I want to be here for you, for us. I don't know what the future holds, but I want to try. Irina set the cup down, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached for his hand again, squeezing it tightly. I don't know what's going to happen either, but I do know one thing, Leonid. I love you. and I always will, no matter what." He squeezed her hand back, his eyes shining with something fierce, hope, perhaps, or a determination to make up for lost time. But whatever it was, Irina knew it was real. This was real. In the silence that followed, they didn't need to speak. The bond they shared, the love that had never truly left them, filled the space between them. And in that moment, as the world outside continued to spin, Irina realized that this second chance, this gift she had been given, was something she would cherish for the rest of her life. It wasn't about understanding all the hows and whys. It was about the fact that for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't alone. Irina sat there, her fingers lightly tracing the rim of her teacup, her thoughts swirling in 1,000 different directions. The boy beside her, who she could no longer simply call her son without the weight of disbelief, had brought something back into her life that she had long since given up on. Hope. Hope that there could be a future beyond the grief, beyond the empty ache that had consumed her for the past 3 years. Yet, as much as she wanted to believe in the miracle that had unfolded before her, the nagging questions kept resurfacing. How was this possible? Why now? What had happened to him? Her heart was caught between the overwhelming joy of having him back and the deep uncertainty of everything else. There was a gaping hole in her understanding of the situation. She couldn't ignore the fact that something beyond the natural order of things had occurred. Leonid, her Leonid, had come back to her. But who was he now? What had changed in him? And most importantly, how long would this miracle last? "Mom!" Leonid's voice cut through her thoughts, soft and gentle. She looked up to find him gazing at her, his eyes filled with a deep sadness, as though he could see the turmoil that raged inside her. "I know this must be so hard for you, and I don't want to confuse you any more than you already are, but I need you to know that I'm here for a reason. I've been given a chance to make things right." Irina felt the familiar pang of love swell in her chest, but there was also a fierce desire for clarity. She needed to understand. She needed answers, even if they were difficult to hear. She needed to know who this young man was before her, the boy who carried all the physical traits of her son, but whose soul felt like it had traveled through an entirely different experience. "I don't understand," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "How is this possible? I saw you. I buried you, Leonid. I watched you fade away, and the pain of losing you was unbearable. How can you be here now?" Leonid took a deep breath, his gaze drifting to the window as if seeking the right words. The light of the late afternoon filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. "I don't have all the answers," he said slowly. "I wish I could explain it better, but I can't. All I know is that after I—" He paused, as if the word was too difficult for him to say. "After I left, I was somewhere else. I wasn't alone, but I wasn't completely at peace either. I realized that I still had a purpose I didn't fulfill. And the reason I'm here now is to make up for all the time we lost, to be with you again, to help you heal." Irina's heart squeezed in her chest. The hope that she had been so reluctant to grasp at first was now beginning to settle in her bones, warming her from the inside. But there was still so much uncertainty. How could she just accept this without understanding more? Without knowing what had truly happened to her son? "I need to know more," she whispered. "Please, tell me everything." Leonid nodded, his expression solemn but understanding. "I don't know everything myself, Mom. But I remember what happened after the accident. I remember the darkness, the coldness. I don't remember exactly what it was, but there was a pull toward something else. It wasn't like being dead, not entirely. It was like being caught between two worlds. I was somewhere in the space between life and death, where I could see things, feel things, but I couldn't touch them, and I couldn't move on." Irina leaned forward, captivated by his words. "So, you were in some kind of limbo?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Leonid's eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something vulnerable in him. something raw. Yes, he said. I wasn't allowed to go forward. I don't know why. Maybe it was because there was unfinished business. Maybe I wasn't ready to leave. But something, or someone, gave me a second chance. I was told that I could return, that I could make up for what I didn't do in life, that I could go back and heal the hurt I caused. Irina's hands trembled, and she set the cup down, her gaze never leaving his. She was starting to believe, not just in the impossible nature of this miracle, but in the sincerity of the boy in front of her. His words carried weight, a deep honesty that she couldn't ignore. And as much as her mind screamed for answers, she knew that deep in her heart, she wanted to believe in this second chance. She wanted to believe that her son, her sweet, joyful Leonid, had come back for a reason. But how? She asked, her voice barely audible. How could something like that happen? How could you come back from the dead? I don't know, he replied, his voice low and regretful. I can't explain it, Mom. I don't know why it happened to me. But I know that I'm here now, and I have the chance to make things right. I can't undo what happened, but I can make up for it. I can be the son you deserve. I can love you the way I was meant to. Irina felt her heart swell with emotions she couldn't contain. The anger, the bitterness, the resentment that had built up over the years had all been replaced by something far more powerful, the desire to heal, to move forward. She didn't know how long she had with him, or what the future would look like, but she knew that for this moment, at least, she had her son back, and she wasn't going to let go of that. I'm so sorry, Leonid whispered, his voice full of regret. I know I hurt you. I know how much I broke you when I died. I didn't want to leave you. I didn't want to cause you all that pain. Irina shook her head, her heart aching, as she reached out to touch his hand. You don't need to apologize, Leonid. You didn't choose this. I've spent so many years thinking I would never see you again. But now I have you back. And that's all that matters. She felt his hand tighten around hers, and for a brief moment, the pain of the past seemed to fade, replaced by a sense of peace that she hadn't known for so long. They sat in silence, the weight of their shared history hanging in the air, but there was something different now. It wasn't just grief anymore. It wasn't just loss. It was the beginning of something new. Leonid shifted in his seat, his eyes now filled with a quiet determination. I know we have a lot to figure out, and I know that this might not be easy for you, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for as long as I can be, and I want to make up for everything. Irina felt tears prick at the corner of her eyes, but they were no longer tears of sorrow. They were tears of something deeper, something more profound. We'll take it one step at a time, she whispered, her voice steady now, full of resolve. One step at a time. And together, we'll figure this out. For the first time in 3 years, Irina felt the weight of the world shift, just a little. The grief, though still present, didn't feel like an anchor anymore. She had her son back, and that, she knew, was the greatest gift of all. And so, in the quiet of their small apartment, surrounded by the echoes of a past both painful and beautiful, Irina held onto her son once more. For as long as they had, she would treasure every moment. The miracle was not just that he had returned. It was that together, they could heal. The days that followed felt like an extension of the surreal moment when Leonid had first walked through that door. Irina knew the reality of what was happening, yet it still didn't feel real. The boy she had lost 3 years ago was now living beside her again. He ate at the kitchen table, watched TV with her, and even teased her, just like they had done before. It was as if the past had been rewritten, though she couldn't erase the nagging questions that lingered in her mind. Leonid had returned, and with him came a sense of warmth, of healing, but also a quiet urgency. He had been clear from the start. He didn't have all the answers, and he didn't know how long this would last. But he was determined to make the most of the time he had, determined to fill the void he had left behind. Irina didn't know how to feel. Part of her still ached for the years they had lost, for the milestones he would never have. She had watched other mothers with their grown children, their families intact, and had longed for what she had once had. But now that Leonid was back, the longing was not so much for what had been lost as it was for what they could build together now. They spent their days simply being with each other. Irina took him to places they used to visit: the park, the little bakery down the street, the library where he had spent hours reading when he was younger. It was a way for them both to reconnect, to establish a new rhythm to their lives. Leonid seemed eager to relive these small moments, to experience the simple joys he had once taken for granted. One afternoon, as they sat together on the old wooden bench in the park, Irina asked him more about his time away, the time between life and death that had separated them. It had been on her mind for days, and she had to know. She had to understand what had happened to her son. "Leonid," she began, her voice soft. "What was it like, where you were? I need to understand. I need to know everything." He looked at her with a seriousness in his eyes that made her heart tighten. "I wish I could give you a better answer," he said slowly, his gaze distant. "But it's hard to describe. It wasn't like anything I could have imagined. It was a place that existed outside of time, outside of the world I knew. I felt like I was drifting in between two realities. I was aware of everything, but I wasn't really there. It was like I was suspended in a kind of waiting room, waiting for something to happen." Irina listened carefully, her hands folded in her lap, as she tried to grasp the enormity of what he was saying. "Did you see anything? Hear anything?" "I did," Leonid replied, his voice quieter now. "I saw people. I saw others who were lost, like me. Some were confused. Others were at peace. But there was always this feeling, this deep sense of not belonging, like I was trapped in a place I couldn't escape. But then, one day, I was told that I could return. I don't know why I was chosen. Maybe it was because of you, because of what you've been through. I was given the chance to come back, to heal, to be with you again." Irina's heart ached for him. She could hear the pain in his voice, the uncertainty in his words. He had been through something unimaginable, something that no mother should ever have to understand. And yet, here he was, sitting beside her, trying to make sense of it all. "I'm just so glad you're here," she whispered, squeezing his hand. "I never thought I'd see you again. And now I don't want to let you go." Leonid smiled at her, though his eyes held a mixture of sadness and determination. "I'm not going anywhere, Mom. I promise. I don't know how long I have, but while I'm here, I want to make up for everything. I want to be the son you deserved." Irina felt tears welling up in her eyes, and she quickly wiped them away. It wasn't out of sadness, but out of an overwhelming sense of love and gratitude. She had lost so much, but in this moment, she realized that she had also gained something back. The grief that had once consumed her was still there, lingering in the corners of her heart, but it no longer ruled her. She had Leonid back, and that was all that mattered. In the days that followed, they grew even closer. They talked about everything, about his childhood, about the things he had dreamed of doing before his life had been tragically cut short. They laughed together, reminiscing about the silly things he had done when he was younger, the pranks he had played, and the jokes he had shared with her. They shared meals together, cooked in the kitchen, and spent hours just talking. There was no rush, no pressure. They were just living, and that was enough. But even as they reveled in the gift of being together again, Irina couldn't ignore the quiet voice inside her that wondered how long this miracle would last. Was this truly a second chance, or was it some fleeting gift that would slip through her fingers just as quickly as it had come? One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Irina finally voiced the question that had been on her mind for weeks. "Leonid," she began, her voice tentative, "I have to ask you something. And I don't want to sound ungrateful, but how do I know this is real? How do I know that you're really here, that this isn't just a dream?" Leonid turned to face her, his expression soft, understanding. "I don't know how to prove it to you, Mom, I can't. But what I can promise is that I'm here, and I'm here for you. I know this is hard to accept, but I want you to trust me. I want you to believe in this, even if you don't understand it." Irina felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She had been afraid to ask, afraid of the answer. But now, hearing his words, she realized that perhaps it wasn't about understanding everything. It wasn't about finding all the answers. It was about accepting the present, the miracle that was unfolding before her. "I trust you," she said, her voice steady. "I don't need to understand everything. I just need you." Leonid smiled, and for the first time since he had returned, Irina saw the boy she had raised in his eyes, the boy who had laughed with her, who had filled their home with light. In that moment, it didn't matter what the future held. All that mattered was that, for now, they were together. And no matter how long this miracle lasted, they would make the most of it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with its last brilliant rays, Irina leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment. The pain of the past still lingered, but the promise of the present, of the love she shared with Leonid, was enough to carry her through. And in her heart, she knew one thing for sure. No matter what happened, this second chance, this gift of time with her son, would be something she would never take for granted. It was a miracle, and she would cherish it every single day.